Lena worked as a waitress in a small hotel restaurant, and most days felt the same for her. She cleaned tables, took orders, and walked quietly from one corner of the room to another. People passed by her all the time, yet no one truly saw her. She was the kind of girl who blended into the background, gentle, soft-spoken, and almost invisible in the noisy world around her. Every evening, the restaurant filled with guests, businessmen talking loudly, families eating together, and travelers. Relaxing after long journeys, Lena moved between them with a small smile. But nobody ever stopped to talk to her, except to ask for more water or another plate. Even her co-workers barely noticed her unless they needed help with something. It sometimes felt like she was only a shadow walking among real people. But Lena hid something inside her, something nobody knew. Whenever she saw a piano, her heart beat faster. She loved music more than anything in the world. Not because she was trained or famous, but because it was the only thing that made her feel alive. Since childhood, she had dreamed of playing on a real stage, but life had never given her even a small chance. One evening, the hotel restaurant was more crowded than usual. A wealthy family had arrived well-dressed, confident and loud. Their daughter, around Lena's age, sat at the large black piano near the corner of the room. She played beautiful notes that filled the air. The guests clapped, the girl smiled proudly, and her parents watched her with shining eyes. Lena stood near the counter, pretending to wipe a glass, but her eyes were fixed only on the piano. She watched the girl's fingers move smoothly across the keys, and a soft ache grew in her chest. She wished just once to touch a real piano, not the broken old keyboard she had at home. The manager noticed Lena staring and frowned. "Lena, stop daydreaming," he said sharply. "Go serve table 12. Lena nodded quickly, hiding her embarrassment. She walked away, but her heart stayed near the piano. Later that night, when the wealthy family left, the piano stood alone. The golden light from the chandelier fell on its polished surface, and the whole restaurant felt quiet for a moment. Lena took a slow breath. Her shift was almost over. Maybe she could just walk a little closer. Not to play, but to look. She stepped forward carefully, one small step at a time, as if she was approaching something holy. She reached the side of the piano and lifted her hand gently. She did not touch it, but she felt the warmth of her own hope rising inside her. Just then, one of the senior staff members, a strict woman named Clara, appeared behind her. Clara's voice was cold as ice when she said, "What are you doing here?" Lena stepped back immediately, her heart dropping. "I was just looking," she whispered. Clara narrowed her eyes. "There's no piano for you," she said in a low, sharp tone. "Stay away from it. You're here to serve, not pretend to be a musician." Lena felt the words hit her like a stone. She looked down at her shoes, nodded silently, and walked away. Her dream felt smaller than ever, almost crushed under Clara's harsh voice. She returned to the kitchen, trying to focus on her work, but her hands trembled slightly. The rest of the shift passed slowly, and Lena finished her work quietly. Nobody noticed her sadness. Nobody saw her wet eyes. She slipped out of the back door into the cool night air. The street outside was empty, and the sky held a thin moon that looked like a silver smile. Lena walked home with slow steps. Each footstep felt heavy, like she was carrying a world of unspoken dreams. At home, she unlocked her small apartment and turned on the lights. In the corner stood her broken keyboard with 10 working keys. She sat down, placed her fingers on the keys, and pressed one softly. The sound was weak and uneven, nothing like the beautiful piano at the hotel, but Lena closed her eyes and played anyway. She poured her pain, her dreams, and her secret wish into the soft notes. She imagined a world where people didn't laugh at her, where she had a chance, where someone believed in her. No one knew this side of her. No one saw the girl with a beautiful dream inside her heart. The world only saw a quiet waitress, but behind that silence lived a melody waiting to be heard. Tonight, Lena played until her eyes closed from exhaustion. She didn't know it yet, but her life was about to change soon in a way she never expected. a way that would make everyone finally notice her. Lena woke up early the next morning, long before the sun touched the sky. Her small apartment was cold, and the old heater made a soft buzzing sound. She sat on the edge of her bed for a moment, feeling the quiet around her. Her fingers still ached from playing the broken keyboard the night before, but her heart ached even more. The words Clara had spoken kept echoing in her mind. "There's no piano for you." She tried to shake the thought away as she got ready for work. Her uniform was neatly ironed, even though it was old. Lena always made sure she looked presentable. She believed that a person should give their best, even if no one noticed, as she walked to the hotel. The cool morning breeze brushed against her face. The streets were almost empty, and the city felt gentle in these early hours. She liked this time of day. There were no loud voices, no rushing people. Just silence, and in silence, she felt free to think about her dreams. But today, her thoughts were heavier. She wondered if she really had the right to dream. Maybe the others were right. Maybe music was something only special people were allowed to touch, people with money, people with connections, not girls like her. When she reached the hotel, the staff room was busy. People laughed loudly, joked, and talked about everything except work. No one noticed Lena walking in. She changed into her apron, tied her hair back, and quietly stepped into the restaurant. But something strange happened that morning. The piano was still there, shining under the lights, untouched since last night. Lena didn't look at it directly. She knew if she did, someone would accuse her again of dreaming too much. So she focused on cleaning tables and preparing for breakfast service. As the hours passed, guests began to fill the restaurant. Lena greeted them softly, served them with care, and smiled politely. She always made sure each customer felt respected, even if they barely looked at her face. But inside her mind, she replayed the moment she had stood near the piano, the moment her fingers almost touched it. She wondered how it would feel to press its keys, to hear real music come from something so perfect. Instead, she could only press the memory of those broken plastic keys at home. Later in the afternoon, when the restaurant was quieter, Lena went into the storage room to bring out extra napkins. While lifting a box, she accidentally knocked down a smaller one. Papers spilled across the floor. She bent to pick them up and froze. Her eyes widened when she saw an old flyer among the papers. Community Music Night Open to All. She stared at it for a long moment. Her hands trembled slightly. The event was only 3 days away, and the flyer said anyone could perform. Anyone. No fee, no special invitation, no rules, just courage. For a moment, her heart filled with a tiny spark of hope. But then she shook her head, laughing softly at herself. It was silly. Who would want to listen to a girl who practiced on a broken keyboard? Who would care about her melody? She placed the flyer back, trying to ignore the feeling growing inside her chest. When she returned to the restaurant, she noticed the guests were whispering about something. She followed their eyes and saw a man entering. He looked different, calm, intelligent, and observant. He carried a polished wooden case, the kind musicians use. Lena didn't know it yet, but this was the famous music professor who would change her life. He took a seat near the window and ordered tea. Lena approached his table carefully, trying not to seem nervous. When she handed him the menu, he looked at her with kind eyes, the kind that actually saw a person. "Do you play music?" he asked suddenly. Lena almost dropped the menu. "Me?" she whispered, surprised. "Yes, you," he said gently. "You have the hands of someone who plays." Her cheeks warmed. She looked down at her hands, small and soft from dishwashing and cleaning. I try," she said honestly. "But I'm not good." He smiled slightly. "You don't have to be good to love music," he replied. "Sometimes the people with the deepest feelings are the ones no one notices." Her breath caught for a moment. No one had ever spoken to her like this. Before she could answer, the manager called her sharply, and she stepped away. The professor watched her leave with curiosity, sensing something hidden beneath her quiet steps. That evening, as Lena walked home again, She carried the memory of his words with her. They were small, simple words, but they touched a place inside her heart that had been silent for years. She didn't know what would happen next, but something inside her had shifted. For the first time in a long time, she felt a door opening, the kind of door only music could unlock. That night felt different from all others. Lena reached home tired, but her heart would not rest. She sat beside her broken keyboard, running her fingers over the cracked keys. They made soft, uneven sounds, small and imperfect like whispers, but for the first time, she didn't feel sad listening to them. She felt hopeful. The professor's words kept echoing inside her mind. Sometimes the people with the deepest feelings are the ones no one notices. She closed her eyes and remembered her childhood. The days when her mother used to hum soft melodies while cooking. Her mother always dreamed of seeing Lena on a stage someday. She used to say, "Music is not only for the rich. It is for anyone whose heart beats with it." But life had taken her mother away too soon, leaving Lena alone with an unfinished dream and an old broken keyboard. The next morning, she walked to the hotel faster than usual. Her steps were still quiet, but not heavy like before. Something inside her had changed. She wanted to see the professor again. She wanted to hear more of those gentle words that made her believe she wasn't invisible. When she reached the restaurant, the staff was buzzing with excitement. The manager announced that the hotel was hosting an important dinner that evening. Many rich guests and officials would come. Everyone must work their best. Lena listened quietly, but her eyes drifted toward the piano in the corner, untouched, waiting. The idea of performing still felt impossible, but the memory of that community music night flyer returned to her. What if she tried? What if she failed? What if she embarrassed herself? 100 questions filled her mind, but one tiny voice whispered, "At least try." During the lunch rush, Lena saw the professor again. He sat at the same table, this time writing something in a notebook. His presence somehow made the whole room feel calmer. She served him tea, and he looked up with a warm smile. "You came early today," he said kindly. Lena nodded shyly. "Yes, sir, long day today." He raised an eyebrow gently. "And how is your music today?" She looked down, twisting her fingers nervously. I still practice," she whispered. "That is enough," he said. "Remember, talent grows only if you feed it." His eyes then drifted toward the piano. "Have you ever played on a real one?" Her heart thumped painfully. "No," she said. Softly, "Never." He leaned closer, speaking low so no one else could hear. "Would you like to?" Lena froze, unsure if she was dreaming. Her lips parted, but no words came out. Before she could answer, the manager shouted her name and she rushed away. But the professor watched her with thoughtful eyes. Later that evening, the restaurant. Lights dimmed, soft golden lamps glowing over every table. Guests dressed in fancy clothes began to arrive. The rich girl from the previous night sat at the piano again, playing confidently while her parents clapped proudly. Lena carried plates from table to table, but her eyes kept drifting to the piano. Something in her chest twisted every time she heard its beautiful sound. She wanted to be happy for the girl, but the envy inside her was too deep. Too quiet, too old. At one point, the rich girl finished playing and left the piano. No one replaced her. The piano stood empty again, shining under the chandelier like a forbidden treasure. And then something unexpected happened. The professor rose from his chair and walked toward the piano, but he did not sit. Instead, he turned to the staff and asked loudly, "Does anyone else here play?" The entire restaurant turned silent for a second. Heads turned, forks paused in midair. Even the manager looked surprised. No one answered. The professor repeated calmly, "Is there anyone who plays?" Lena stood near the service counter, gripping a tray tightly, her heart hammered in her chest. She looked around to see if someone else would step forward. No one did. Finally, she lifted her hand slightly. Almost invisible, almost trembling. But before she could raise it fully, Clara appeared behind her and whispered sharply in her ear, "Don't even think about it. You'll embarrass all of us." Lena froze, her courage collapsing like fragile glass. She lowered her hand quickly, afraid of being humiliated again. But the professor saw her movement, even that tiny attempt. His eyes followed her, and a small knowing smile touched his lips. He said nothing but watched her with full attention. Lena tried to slip away, but the professor's voice reached across the room, soft but clear. "You," he said gently. "What is your name?" She turned slowly, her breath stuck in her throat. The entire restaurant stared at her, waiting, judging. "Lena," she whispered. The professor nodded. "Lena, do you play the piano?" Her heart trembled. She didn't know what to say. She wanted to scream, "Yes," but fear pressed hard on her voice. She wanted to say, "No." But her soul refused to lie, so she whispered the truth, her voice small but honest. I try," the professor smiled, not with pity, but with respect. "Then tonight," he said softly, "you will try here." Lena's eyes widened, the room gasped, and everything around her changed in one breath. Lena's breath caught in her throat. She stood frozen in place, her fingers gripping the side of the service counter to stop them from shaking. The professor's words echoed through the restaurant like a bell. "Tonight, you will try here." The room fell into a strange silence. Guests leaned forward in their chairs. Whispers began, some shocked, some curious, some amused. Clara stared at Lena with eyes full of anger. The manager looked as if someone had dropped a plate in front of him. Lena wanted to run away, hide, or disappear, anything but stand in front of all those strangers. Her heart felt too big for her chest, pounding wildly. But the professor gave her a calm nod, a kind of silent promise that she wasn't alone. "Go on," he said softly. "Walk with me." Her feet felt heavy as stone, but somehow they moved. She followed him toward the piano. Each step felt louder than the entire restaurant. She could hear every breath she took, every thought in. Her head screaming she wasn't ready, she wasn't good enough, she wasn't meant for this. But something deeper pushed her forward, something that had lived inside her since childhood, something her mother had planted, a small flame of music that refused to die. When they reached the piano, the professor pulled the bench out gently and gestured for her to sit. Lena hesitated, her hands almost trembling. I don't know if I can," she whispered, barely audible. He leaned closer with a soft smile. "That is why you must sit." She lowered herself onto the bench, her legs shaking. The polished wood felt cool beneath her hands. The keys waited. In front of her, shining like 100 tiny mirrors reflecting her fear, the professor spoke quietly so only she could hear. "Listen to your heart first, not the room." Lena closed her eyes for a second, taking in a slow, shaky breath. She remembered her mother's humming, the dream that never left her. The nights she practiced on her broken keyboard, the hope she thought she had lost. She lifted her hands. Slowly, her fingers suspended above the keys. The room watched, breathless, unsure of what would happen next. Then she pressed the first note. A soft trembling sound came out. Small but pure. It was not perfect, but it was real. She pressed another, then another, and the melody began to form like a fragile thread spinning from her heart. The guests leaned back in surprise. The staff stopped walking. Even the manager lowered his hand from his forehead. Lena opened her eyes and looked at the piano, not the people. A warmth began rising in her chest. Melting the fear little by little, she moved from one note to the next, her fingers remembering patterns she had practiced in the dark of her room. The melody grew fuller, clearer, growing like a flower opening under sunlight. But halfway through, something happened. She hit a wrong note, a sharp sound that cut through the perfect quiet. A few guests flinched. Clara smirked, and Lena's heart squeezed painfully. She almost pulled her hands away, ready to stand up and apologize, ready to run away, but the professor whispered from behind her. "Continue." His voice was steady, like a hand catching her before she fell. Lena forced herself to breathe. Her fingers returned to the keys. She played through the mistake, not trying to fix it, But trying to feel again, and then something inside her unlocked, her fear melted, replaced by emotion she had carried for years. She played not to impress, but to speak, to release everything she had held inside her loneliness, her dreams, her mother's memory, her silent wishes. Her melody filled the room, soft and warm at first, then stronger, deeper. The guests fell silent again. This time, it wasn't shock, it was awe. Her music felt like a story, one wordless but full of meaning. Some people leaned forward with soft eyes, others looked around, as if trying to understand how this girl, this quiet, unnoticed waitress, could make a piano sound like a voice. When she reached the final notes, her hands slowed, her breath steadied, the air felt thick, as if the entire room was holding its breath with her. Then she pressed the last key. A gentle fading note filled the room, then disappeared into a deep, almost magical silence. Lena slowly lowered her hands and stared at them in disbelief. She had done it. She had played a real piano in front of real people. Before she could look up, someone clapped, softly at first, then louder, then more people joined. The sound grew, filling the room with applause. Lena looked up, stunned. Tears shone in her eyes. She had never felt anything like this. The professor stood behind her with quiet pride. "You did something brave today," he said gently. "You didn't hide yourself." Lena's heart felt lighter than ever before. She had shown the world a piece of her soul, and the world hadn't rejected her. It had listened. Lena sat frozen on the piano bench, still hearing the last echo of applause inside her chest. Her hands rested on her knees, trembling gently, not from fear this time, but from something she had never felt before. It was pride, mixed with disbelief, mixed with a tiny spark of happiness that felt almost unreal. The professor placed a hand on her shoulder, steady and warm. "Music speaks truth," he said softly. "Tonight, your truth reached them." Lena swallowed hard, her throat tight with emotion. She looked at the guests who were still watching her, some smiling, some whispering, some wiping their eyes. She didn't understand why they reacted this way to her simple melody, but she knew it meant something, something big, something she had never dared to imagine. Clara, standing by the service station, wore an expression that twisted between shock and anger. She clearly hadn't expected Lena to play anything more than a few clumsy notes. The manager looked confused too, as if he couldn't decide whether this moment was a problem or a miracle. Before anyone could speak to Lena, the professor cleared his throat and addressed the room. "This young woman," he said, motioning toward Lena, "has played from her heart, not from training. Her music is pure emotion." His words made Lena blush. She wanted to hide, but at the same time she wanted to smile. It was strange to feel both things at once. The manager stepped forward finally and muttered, "Well, that was unexpected." Lena bit her lip, ready to apologize, ready to go back to being invisible. But the professor raised his hand slightly and stopped her from speaking. He looked straight at the manager. "She has talent," he said firmly, "and talent must be encouraged." Some guests nodded, agreeing. The manager hesitated, unsure how to respond. After a moment, he forced a small, stiff smile. "Yes, well, perhaps she surprised us all," he said, trying to look in control. Lena stepped away from the piano, her knees still weak. The applause faded slowly behind her as she moved back to the employee area. Every step felt unreal, like she was walking inside a dream she didn't want to end. When she reached the staff room, she sat down on a small wooden stool and took a deep breath. She hoped no one would come in, but of course, someone did. Clara pushed open the door sharply and walked in. With tight eyes, so Clara said coldly, "You think you're special now just because you played one little song?" Lena looked away. I didn't say that," she whispered. Clara stepped closer, her voice sharp like broken glass. "Don't forget your place. You're a waitress, not some stage performer." Lena felt her heart sink. She had expected something like this, but the pain still stung. She didn't want to argue, so she stayed quiet. But the professor entered the room at that very moment, startling both women. His voice was calm but strong. "You should not speak to her like that." Clara stiffened. "Sir, He lifted a hand, stopping her. "Respect should be given to everyone, regardless of their job," he said firmly. Clara fell silent, embarrassed. The professor turned to Lena, his expression softening. "You played beautifully," he said. "Tell me, where did you learn?" Lena looked at the floor, shy. I never learned properly, sir. I just practiced on a broken keyboard at home." The professor's eyes widened with honest surprise. "Then your potential is even greater than I thought." Lena blinked. "Greater?" She repeated quietly. He nodded. "Yes, if you can create such emotion with no training and poor equipment. Imagine what you could do with guidance." Lena felt her heart squeeze, not from pain this time, but from a type of hope so new it scared her. She had never imagined having a teacher, a mentor, or anyone who believed in her talent. The professor took a deep breath. "Tomorrow evening, I want you to come to the music hall 2 streets away. I will be giving a small workshop for young musicians." Lena froze. "Me?" "Of course you," he said with a gentle smile. "You belong among people who love music." Lena's heart pounded wildly. She didn't know if she should cry, or laugh, or simply collapse from shock. But all she could say was, "Thank you, sir. I don't know if I deserve this." He shook his head. "Everyone deserves a chance." After he left, Lena remained in the staff room for a long time, thinking about everything that had happened. It felt like a door had opened for her, a real door, not just in her imagination. When she walked home that night, the city lights looked brighter, the sky felt wider. Even the cold breeze felt softer against her cheeks. At home, she sat at her broken keyboard again. But this time, she didn't feel sad about its missing keys. She closed her eyes and played, imagining the real piano under her fingers again. She played the same melody she had performed at the hotel, but now with more confidence, more warmth, more hope. For the first time in her life, she believed something she had never dared to believe before. Maybe, just maybe, she truly had a place in the world of music. Lena barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the piano, the professor's face, the guests clapping, and her own trembling hands playing music she never believed anyone would hear. By the time morning came, her heart felt full of fear and excitement at the same time. It was like holding a small bird, delicate, alive, and ready to fly. At the hotel, things felt different. Some staff members looked at her with new eyes. A few even whispered behind her back, not with mockery this time, but with confusion and curiosity. Clara still looked angry, but she kept her distance. Maybe because she wasn't sure how to treat Lena anymore. The professor wasn't at breakfast service, so Lena worked quietly, serving guests with her usual gentle smile. But inside her mind, she kept replaying his invitation. "You belong among people who love music." The words felt unreal, almost magical. She wanted to believe them, but a small voice inside her kept whispering doubts. What if he made a mistake? What if she wasn't good enough to stand with trained musicians? What if everyone laughed at her? By the time her shift ended, her stomach twisted with nerves. She walked home quickly, washed her face, changed into clean clothes, and stood in front of her mirror, staring at her reflection. She looked like the same girl, simple, quiet, unnoticed, but she didn't feel like the same person anymore. As evening came, she walked toward the music hall. Her hands shook and her steps felt unstable. She wondered again if she should turn back, but something stronger pushed her forward. The possibility of a new life, a new chance, her mother would have been proud of. When she reached the building, she stopped at the entrance. The hall looked big from the outside, with tall wooden doors and wide windows. Soft music drifted from inside, real music, played by real trained musicians. Her heart raced. She took a deep breath and stepped inside. The hall was warm and filled with a soft golden glow. A group of young musicians practiced on stage, some playing violin, some guitar, some piano. They all seemed confident and talented. The sound of their instruments blended like colorful ribbons in the air. Lena stood quietly near the back, feeling out of place. She wondered if anyone would notice she didn't belong. But then the professor walked onto the stage, noticed her instantly, and smiled. "Lena," he called warmly. "Come here." She stepped forward slowly, feeling dozens of eyes turned toward her. The professor guided her to a seat near the piano. "You came," he said. "Good," Lena nodded. "I was scared," she admitted. He gave a small laugh. "Fear is normal. It means what you're doing matters." The workshop began. The professor talked about emotions, rhythm, breathing, and how music should feel like telling a story. Lena listened carefully, absorbing every word. She didn't understand all the technical terms, but she understood the feelings he described, because she had felt them all her life. When it was time for students to perform, one by one they played beautifully. Their hands moved fast and confidently across the keys. Their skills made Lena feel even smaller. She looked down at her fingers, shy and uncertain, wondering if they could ever dance like that. After a few performances, the professor turned to her gently. "Lena," he said softly, "would you like to try something?" Her heart jumped. "Me?" "Yes, you," he smiled. "Come sit here." The room grew quiet as Lena walked toward the piano. She sat down slowly, her hands cold, her breath uneven. She stared at the keys, white and black, perfect and waiting. "Play the melody you played at the hotel," the professor said. "Trust yourself." Lena closed her eyes for a moment, trying to calm her racing heart. She remembered her mother's humming, the broken keyboard at home, the applause from the hotel, and the feeling of her fingers touching a real piano for the first time. Then she pressed the first note. It came out soft, trembling, just like at the hotel. But then her hands remembered the rest. The melody floated through the hall, gentle and emotional. The other students listened, surprised by the raw feeling in her music. They could hear the pain in her notes, the longing, the hope, the years of silent dreams. Halfway through, her fear melted again. Her fingers moved more confidently, more freely. The melody rose and fell like a heartbeat, delicate yet strong. When she finished, the room was silent for a moment. Then two students clapped softly. Then more joined. Soon everyone in the hall applauded her, not loudly, but warmly, respectfully. Lena looked up in disbelief, her eyes shining with tears. The professor stepped forward and spoke gently. "You see, music is not about perfection. It is about honesty. You played honestly." A girl from the violin group approached Lena, smiling kindly. "That was beautiful," she said. "Did you really learn on a broken keyboard?" Lena nodded shyly. "That's even more incredible," another student added. For the first time in her life, Lena didn't feel invisible. She felt seen, heard. After the workshop ended, the professor walked beside her as she left the hall. "There's a scholarship program," he said, "for students who show natural talent." Lena looked up quickly, her heart pounding again. "Me," she whispered. He smiled gently. "Yes, you. I want you to apply." Her eyes filled with tears. I don't know if I deserve something so big." The professor placed a hand on her shoulder. "Deserving doesn't matter. Your heart truthfully loves music. That is enough." As Lena walked home, her steps felt lighter than ever. The city lights looked warm, and the night sky felt full of endless possibilities. She held her hands close to her chest, feeling the fading warmth of the piano in her fingertips. For the first time, she no longer doubted herself. She could finally imagine a future where she wasn't the girl no one noticed. She was the girl with a melody the world couldn't ignore. Lena woke up the next morning with the sun shining gently through her window. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like a shadow. She felt like a person with a purpose. Her heart was full of a new warmth she was still learning to understand. She made herself tea and sat quietly on her small bed, holding the professor's last words in her mind. "There's a scholarship program I want you to apply. The sentence repeated again and again, filling her with hope and fear in equal measure. A scholarship meant training, a future, a chance thing she had never allowed herself to dream too loudly of at work. The atmosphere felt different again. A few co-workers who had ignored her for years now smiled awkwardly at her. One even said, "Nice job last night," though he quickly walked away before she could answer. Clara, on the other hand, stayed far away. She glared occasionally, but she didn't say anything, maybe because even she couldn't deny what Lena had done. The professor arrived later in the morning, as usual, taking his seat near the window. Lena approached him with a shy smile. "Good morning, sir," she said. Softly, "Good morning, Lena," he replied warmly. "How do you feel today?" "Nervous," she admitted, "but also excited." "That is good," he said. "Excitement gives the heart wings. Nerves keep the feet on the ground. Together, they help you fly without falling." Lena laughed softly, surprised by his poetic wisdom. When she returned to the kitchen, Clara cornered her near the storage room, her voice sharp. "Do you really think someone like you can win a scholarship?" Lena felt the old sting of insecurity, but something inside her had changed. She didn't shrink back this time. She didn't lower her eyes. Instead, she answered softly but firmly, "I don't know, but I will try." Clara blinked, taken aback by Lena's sudden strength. She opened her mouth to say something, but no words came. She simply turned away. Annoyed and unsettled, after her shift, Lena met the professor outside the hotel. He held a folder in his hand. "This is the application form," he said, handing it to her. "I will help you fill it out." They sat on a bench in the small park across the street. Children played nearby, and sunlight danced between the leaves. The professor explained each question gently, her background, her experience, her passion, her dreams. Lena felt shy writing about herself, especially when she had to explain why. She wanted to study music. When she reached that part, her pen stopped, her mind went blank. The professor noticed. "What are you thinking?" he asked kindly. Lena stared at the paper. "I don't know what to write," she said softly. "I want it, but I don't know how to explain why someone like me deserves this." The professor leaned back slightly, studying her with thoughtful eyes. "Let me ask you something," he said. "Why do you play?" Lena swallowed. "Because when I play, I feel like myself." "And why do you want to learn more?" "Because I want to play better. I want my music to grow. I want to make people feel something good." The professor smiled gently. "Then write that. Truth is always more powerful than fancy words." Lena nodded, her eyes softening. She wrote slowly, carefully from her heart. When they finished, the professor placed the papers back in the folder. "Tomorrow," he said, "I will submit this. For you." The words made Lena's heart flutter again as they stood to leave. The professor added something else, something that made her breath catch. "Also, tomorrow evening, there will be a small gathering in the hotel restaurant again. Many important guests will attend." Lena blinked. "More performances?" "Yes," he said. "And I want you to play again." Her breath hitched. "Me? But last time was just luck." The professor shook his head. "It wasn't luck, it was heart, and you have plenty of that." Lena looked down, nervous but touched. "What should I play?" "Whatever speaks to you," he replied. "Music is strongest when it comes from truth." All night, Lena practiced on her broken keyboard. She chose a melody she had written secretly months ago, a soft, hopeful tune inspired by her mother. It wasn't perfect, but it was hers, and that made it special. When the evening came, she put on her best clothes and walked to the hotel with trembling hands. The restaurant was full of important guests dressed in elegant outfits. The piano shone under the warm lights, waiting for her. The professor greeted her. "Are you ready?" "No," she whispered honestly. He smiled. "That means your heart is awake." "Good." When he called her name, the guests looked toward her with curiosity and expectation. Lena stepped toward the piano with slow, careful steps. She sat down on the bench. feeling the familiar mix of fear and excitement flood her chest. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and began to play. The first notes were soft like falling snow, gentle, delicate, full of emotion. Her fingers moved with a quiet confidence. She didn't know she had. She let her heart speak, and the melody filled the room like warm light. People leaned closer, drawn toward her music. Conversations stopped. Glasses paused mid-air. Some guests looked at each other in surprise. Her music didn't sound like a student's or an amateur's. It sounded like a story, one of sadness, hope, and quiet strength. And when she reached the final notes, the room turned silent. For a moment, everything stood still. Then applause erupted, louder than before. Deeper, more powerful, Lena's eyes filled with tears. She had done it again, only this time. The applause meant something even more important. She wasn't just being noticed, she was being believed in. The applause faded slowly, but the feeling remained in the air like warm sunlight long after sunset. Lena rose from the piano bench with shaky legs. Her heart was beating fast, not from fear this time, but from overwhelming joy. She looked around the room and saw something she had never seen, directed toward her: respect, appreciation, and quiet admiration. The professor stepped forward, eyes shining with pride. "You have a gift, Lena," he said softly, "and tonight you shared it with honesty and courage." Lena lowered her head shyly. "Thank you, sir," she whispered, though the words felt too small for what she felt inside. Some of the important guests approached her. One woman said, "Your music touched my heart." Another said, "You should be on a real stage." A man even asked if she had recorded songs anywhere. Lena shook her head, too overwhelmed to form more answers. When the crowd finally settled back into their seats, the professor guided Lena to a quiet corner near the window. He held the scholarship folder in his hand. "I submitted this earlier today," he said. "Tonight was part of your evaluation." Lena's breath caught. "Evaluation?" The professor nodded. "Yes, the scholarship board wanted to see your emotional ability, and you showed them something rare." Her heart trembled. "Do you think I have a chance?" He smiled softly. "I think you have more than a chance." Later that night, Lena walked home under the city lights. She held her hands close to her chest as if protecting the memory of the piano's warm keys. Her steps felt lighter than ever, but her mind buzzed with fear and hope tangled together. At home, she placed her broken keyboard gently on her lap. She touched the cracked keys and whispered, "Thank you," as if speaking to an old friend who had carried her through her darkest days. She fell asleep with music still humming softly inside her heart. The next morning, everything changed. Lena had just stepped into the hotel when she saw the professor waiting outside the entrance. His face looked serious but warm. He held an envelope in his hand. "Lena," he said, "may I speak with you?" She nodded nervously, wiping her hands on her apron without thinking. He handed her the envelope. "This arrived early this morning." Her fingers trembled as she held it. The envelope had the scholarship board's seal. She felt her heart beating so hard she thought it might burst. "Open it," the professor encouraged gently. Lena took a shaky breath and tore the envelope carefully. She unfolded the letter inside and read the first line. Her eyes widened, her breath stopped, her knees almost gave out. She looked up at the professor with tear-filled eyes. I got it," she whispered, barely believing her own voice. "Yes," he said, smiling proudly. "You are officially a scholarship student of the Academy of Music." Lena covered her mouth with her hands, tears rolling down her cheeks. She had dreamed quietly her whole life and never imagined those dreams would step into reality. The professor placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "This is just the beginning," he said. "Your journey starts now." Word spread quickly among the staff. Some congratulated her with warm smiles, a few with surprise. Even Clara couldn't hide her shock. She said nothing for a long moment, then whispered stiffly, "Good for you." It wasn't friendly, but it wasn't cruel either. And for the first time, Lena felt no fear around her. Weeks passed, and Lena began attending classes. At the academy, every day, she learned something new: techniques, rhythms, musical theory, stage presence. She practiced for hours, her fingers growing stronger and faster. She still felt shy sometimes, still doubted herself on hard days, but she always remembered the professor's words, "Fear means your heart is awake." She played in small recitals, slowly gaining confidence.